This crusade is much more important than the anti-lynching movement, because there would be no lynching if it did not first happen in the schoolroom. This was said by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month in 1933. And I'm here to tell you today that on July 30th, 2016, I found out more than any other time in my life just how important the Black history he advocated for was and how it could save one's life. This is how Black history can save your life. July 30th, 2016 was a hot, sweltering day, y'all. My wife and I were on the south side of Chicago at the South Shore Cultural Center. We were 2 weeks before having to return back to work as educators. My wife had been teaching high school math for 8 years up at that point. I had been teaching high school history for 6 years. We were both in Joliet, which is roughly about 45 minutes from Chicago. This was also several years before anybody across the country, across the world would know me online for my content, or for my teaching, or for my videos, or book. This was also, y'all, 2 weeks after 2 Black men were killed on camera by police. Rest in peace, Alton Sterling. Rest in peace, Philando Castile. Before leaving that day, my wife and I wanted to play a game, cornhole, at this outdoor festival. So we walked over to this area, but we noticed that we needed more beanbags to play. My wife located another beanbag. We didn't realize this would actually be a bad decision. There was a group of 4 people next to us, 2 Black and 2 white. We didn't realize that they were still using that bag because it was so far away. A white lady in that group around the same age as us approached us, very angry, and began screaming at us at the top of her lungs to demand the bag back. We immediately refused. She then began to gesture towards the cops to tell them to come save her, to come help her. I couldn't believe what was happening, because even with that said, it continued to escalate. And she said something I would have never imagined over a beanbag. She said, "You all are acting like a bunch of N-words." At that point in time, my life flashed before my eyes. She's gesturing towards cops to come, we're being screamed at, and now she's calling us the N-word. With Philando Castile and Alton Sterling fresh in my mind, the only thing I could think of to do in that moment is to make sure I had evidence of anything that would happen after. So I took out my phone. And this is what happened immediately after. Trigger warning. This might make some of you all very uncomfortable.
Say it again. She knocked my phone. So if I hit her, what happens to me? What happens to me? What happens to me? Phone out my head. Calling me and know me, man.
We don't bother.
You act. Say, keep saying, give me your name. Give me.
Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. Gather yourself. What do you do in that moment? How do you respond? What happened in that moment was unexpected, but it happened. And in that moment, you can only respond based on how you were prepared priorly in your life. See, I told you all I taught history in high school for 6 years up until that point, but I didn't tell you that I taught it from a Black historical perspective. I taught it overall from a perspective of people who were overlooked, regardless of their backgrounds, their ethnicity, class status. But for the first time in my life on this level, I had dealt with something that I have been teaching about. So I was shocked, of course, but I must tell you that I wasn't really surprised, because I was aware of what was going on in America in 2016. See, many people might not know this, but between 2015 and 2024, hate crimes have more than doubled across America. This means to me that I was right in the midst of that upswing. And as someone who taught about Black history from a perspective of people who dealt with that, I felt I was ready to fight. What I want to propose to you is, Black history can save your life, just like it saved my life in that moment, because it can teach you how to fight through it if you are ever the target of it. But we must also understand that we can use it as a preventative tool. Because how do we stop someone from being raised to think that that's okay? The first thing we must do is realize that studying Black history will give us the context of the Black experience, or all in all, the human experience. Because once you learn about what someone goes through, you understand more of their story. Context meaning that, when we look at America, what it stands for, when you're in school, you start saying the pledge at an early age, right? Liberty and justice for all, freedom and justice for all men are created equal. But I come from a group of people that would interject and say, that's not how you're actually practicing it. See, I come from a group of people that will say, yeah, I understand in America, a lot of us are immigrants, but not all of us. For example, if you are indigenous, your ancestors were already here. You were the targets and victims of genocide. You didn't call this landmass America. In fact, you may have referred to it as Turtle Island. My ancestors, in fact, were not from here, from West and Central Africa. But we didn't choose to come here. So, we are a beautiful land of various backgrounds, but we aren't all immigrants. Here's the best way to remember this. I understand there are some folks here today whose ancestors may have dropped everything they had and risked it all to come here. That's an admirable thing to do. They may have only come here with $20 in their pocket. Can you imagine? But I would propose to you that that American dream that they advocated for and came for was only possible at the expense of my ancestors living through the American nightmare, worth over $2,000 in some folks' pockets. Context, y'all, context. Context meaning that over 12 million African people over the course of 300 years were enslaved, trafficked from West and Central Africa to America during the transatlantic slave trade, the Middle Passage or the Mayflower. 12 million, that's like a population of Chicago, maybe times 5 or 6. But at the same time, during that time period, roughly 2 to 2.5 million did not survive. That would be like going to Chicago or Houston and not seeing a soul. Almost everybody gone, disappeared. Context, y'all. When we talk about the context of the Black experience, we also have to keep in mind that if we start with 1619, when African people were first taken to the English colonies against their will, and if we ended in 1968, when the last landmark civil rights legislation was passed, also the same year that Dr. King was assassinated, that would only be 349 years. I want you to keep that in mind because that's 349 years of trauma, tragedy. But I also have to help you understand that through that time period, what helped Black American, African American fight through was something that they came here with. Because people will say we came here with nothing in our pockets. That's not true. Unless the only thing you value is something monetary. We can trace African culture back hundreds and thousands of years. If we just started with physical artifacts that we have, we can look at the Blombus caves in South Africa. You'll find artifacts dated between 70 and 100,000 years ago. So what played a bigger role contextually in who Black American people are? Just that 349-year time period or the 70 to 100,000 years prior? When I was growing up, y'all, I didn't learn about African history in school. I would walk through my house, and how you all would see art all throughout this building, that's what my house looked like. My parents had a poster series plastered on the wall in the 90s called The Great Kings and Queens of Africa. Ironically, it was sponsored by a beer company in the 70s. True story. One of the individuals I most remember is this man right here named Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was a king over the Kingdom of Mali, adjusted for inflation. He is regarded as the wealthiest or one of the wealthiest people of all time. He had so much money when he went on his pilgrimage to Mecca, he gave out gold all across the area in Africa, causing an inflation. That's not something we often learn about in school, but seeing that helped me retain and create a positive self-image of who I am, contextually. But it's even deeper than that, y'all. When I say Black history can save your life, I'm being for real. Because in the 1700s, there was an African man who was captured from Ghana, the Akan tribe, forced to come to Boston. Again, people will assume, oh, he was just a slave. No, he was a man, an African person who was enslaved. He came here with knowledge of medicine. He came here with knowledge of inoculation processes. And he told the people there during the smallpox epidemic that you should use this process to help yourself during this epidemic. And despite his status in American society, they eventually listened. And that knowledge he brought with him of Black history literally in that moment saved their life. And he's in the lineage of one Imhotep, who was regarded from Kemet as the first doctor in recorded history in Africa. Also, first mathematician. We can keep going with that. What's important to understand is, as you learn the context of Black people in this country, African people, that this was happening without Western influence, without Western universities, without Western culture. Because these were people, y'all, who were not slaves. My ancestors were never slaves. They were enslaved. That's a big difference. How can Black history save your life? You understand the context of our experience, the human experience. And the second thing that will happen after that is you will gain compassion, naturally. How can you learn about what happened through the Mayflower, the Middle Passage, how people were packed on top of each other, over 2 million survived, and not be compassionate? And when you get that compassion, then you're driven to action. But the first thing that happens for me, for any Black person, any person of color, is when you learn about it, you become self-compassionate. What I mean is, William Steele, this Black man was born during the period of enslavement, but he wasn't a slave. He was born free. His parents were born enslaved. They fought to free themselves. They also helped free people during the Underground Railroad. Their house was used as a location. William Steele started helping out y'all at 8 years old. Can you imagine? You want to watch Sesame Street. And you should be able to, but you're helping free people. Because of that self-compassion, this brother will go on to help free upwards of 1,000 black people from slavery, one of which was his brother, and he didn't even know it at the time. This was in Philadelphia, and yes, if you're asking this question, it's true. He also did work hand in hand with the Harriet Tubman. So this is true, y'all. This is true. We know this to be true. When black children are taught to have racial pride, they perform better academically. William Steele is proof of that, not because of his grades, but because that means that you are more likely to persevere through difficult situations and have self-determination. But we talk about compassion. That's not just something black people should have for themselves. It's something all people should have for this experience, and just for humans in general. What if you're a white child? People will tell you white children shouldn't learn about the history of racism and slavery because it will make them feel bad. I don't believe that to be true. In fact, research says that when white children learn about racism, they're less likely to exhibit bias. I think that's for anybody, right? The more you learn about somebody's context, the more you have compassion and understanding about what they went through, and the more likely you want to help them out. But here's the issue. And it's not anybody's fault, because when you're growing up, you're only exposed to what the teacher teaches you. Most white children aren't taught about white folks who look like them who fought against racism or slavery. None of us are. In fact, I want to propose this question to everybody here, but particularly the white folks here. Can you name 5 white people who fought against racism or slavery in American history? Most people can't. I asked that question around the world. Most people don't raise their hand because they don't know, and that's a problem. See, here's the thing. Why is it that we can all in this room right here name who George Washington is, Thomas Jefferson is, Benjamin Franklin is? Yeah, they did some amazing things back then, but we also know what they were advocating for. Some of our founding fathers also enslaved people. But why is it that during the same time period, you can't name Warren Mifflin, a nearly 7-foot-tall white man, he was nearly 7 feet tall, can you imagine that back then? Who existed during that period of time and was advocating for reparations. He manumitted the white people, he manumitted the black people he enslaved, and advocated for reparations and abolishing slavery in the late 1700s. So imagine if everybody across this country, particularly white children, were taught about him. That role model, that vision, goes a long way. Black history cultivates compassion, and we also learned previously that comes from context. The last thing is it helps us build community. I learned here at this university, y'all, when I first came, that everybody here has ancestry from Africa. I learned that from Dr. Abdul Al-Kalimani. And I also learned something even more powerful from another professor in the University of Michigan, Dr. Earl Lewis. He gave me another perspective. Beyond race just being a social construct, he said, look, if we are 99.99% the same, why is it that systems of oppression were built based on the 0.01% difference we have? What would our societies be like if we focused on molding and creating systems of justice for the 99% of things we have in common? That community that we have today becomes something that's blurred because all we can see on the outside is how different we are. This is not to say that we should not focus on the beautiful things we have that are different, but it's to say that there's more in common amongst us. And it's because of this community that was cultivated, that I was aware of, that I was able to successfully fight for justice. Because I'm sure you're probably wondering now, what happened in this situation? Well, when I was fighting for justice, in my case, of course black people helped me. But I also had a diverse background of people that gathered together that looked just like you, because they understood the context of my experience. They understood that they needed compassion, and they understood that that community is important. And as such, she was sentenced to 3 months in jail. But is that justice? Racism is more complex than a hate crime, y'all. It's the fact that still, to this day, the median white family has 6 to 7 times more wealth than the average or median black family. And that's because of this legacy still being unresolved. So based on what Dr. Woodson talked about and told us, we know that black history can be used as a solution to this problem, because if lynching starts in the schoolroom, then that means justice and compassion and healing can too. The schoolroom is the rest of the foundation of this place, of the justice we need today. But in order to get it, y'all, we have to make sure that when we study black history, when we study human history, we do it to understand the context of our experience, to cultivate compassion that we need for all people, so that we can then move to community to fight for the justice we all need together. This, y'all, is how black history can save your life. Thank you.